right, good morning, Kingdom Life. How are you? Nothing like a quiet hello to get you going in the morning, guys. I was walking up here and my son said to me, "Don't bomb, Dad." That's all. Literally, that's what just happened. So guys, it's always an honor to be here. I think it's my third or fourth time doing this now. It's an honor. I grew up in this church. I've been here for 20 plus years. It's funny, I was actually, just yesterday, my wife was talking to me and she just said out of the blue, we were talking about today, and she said, "Are you ready?" Because she said, "Don't embarrass this family." She didn't say that, guys. But she said, "You know, it's such an honor, it's such a privilege that they still ask you to do that." And the truth of the matter is that I really do believe that. Every time I get up here, I want to do our bishop justice. The fact that he trusts me while he's away is probably a poor decision now that I think about it. But you know what? It means a lot because this is real power here to be able to get up in front of you. You guys come here expecting something? Awesome. I will talk to the 9 of you that came here expecting something today, but I hope you actually come here expecting something. How many of you are familiar with me? How many of you have been, I want to get context really quickly here. Okay, how many of you have no idea, like you're just kind of, okay, awesome. You guys are dead to me. Okay, you guys are. So for those of you that aren't aware, my name is Jared James. Unless I don't do well today, then my name is Pastor Mike Bulkley. Hopefully that will not happen. Want to say hello to our live streaming folks today. I know some of you were riding bikes to church today and couldn't make it in the rain, so that's all good. But for those of you that get to watch us all over the world, guys, live stream, welcome. Those of you watching on social right now, I love social. If you're on there, feel free to tag me. If you like something, send me a message, ask questions, whatever you want on Instagram or Facebook. How many of you are on social, by the way? Just out of curiosity here. All right, awesome. So if you guys are on there, make sure to do that today. I am going to title today's message, Qualified and Ready. That's going to be the title. Qualified and Ready. Guys, do me a favor, look at somebody a little bit less attractive than you and say, "I am qualified." Woo. Come on. Now look at somebody, anybody this time, and say, "I'm ready." Awesome. How many of you have ever felt like you aren't doing the most with whatever it was that God's given you? Okay? How many of you, here's a better question, guys, for those of you that don't feel comfortable answering that, how many of you know somebody who's ever felt like they are not doing something? Okay, are they in your seat? It's probably the better question, right? I think we all have that feeling from time to time, and that's kind of where this came from today, is the whole qualified and ready talk. You know, what I love about God, when you really think about it, is that when other people give up on us, that's usually when God is just getting started, right? When others give in, that's when he tends to go all in. Does anybody relate to that? Anybody have anything ever happen in your life that just makes you completely unqualified? Don't lose eye contact right now, but have you guys ever had that, right? Last time I was up here, I talked about the struggle is real. Do you guys remember that message? The struggle is real, right? And we talked about all the different struggles we go through and the things that ultimately are needed to get us there. But the truth of the matter is, we use these word games and whatever. Struggles are necessary, but so are screw-ups. Now, I know that's not acceptable in a church sense because we're all supposed to be like Jesus and perfect, but screw-ups in many cases are also necessary. Is this true or not true? Guys, I hope so because that's where I'm going right now, okay? So screw-ups are necessary. Guys, think about it. I don't know about you, but when I read the Bible, Moses did what? And by the way, what's the difference between struggles and screw-ups? Okay? Struggles are what happened to us, right? Screw-ups are what we did. Anybody did anything, right? Struggle, see, we can all relate to struggle because we're like, oh, it's just struggle. God's just working with me. It's just, I like that, whatever. Screw-ups are a completely different thing, right? I've screwed up today. I've screwed up right? It's what you do. Moses, he went through struggle, but he also screwed up. He is ultimately the man that was used to lead over 2 million Israelites out of Egypt, and he murdered a man. I want you to think about that for a second, just when you think you're unqualified. He murdered a man. Peter turned his back on Jesus. Paul, formerly known as Saul, was responsible in the early ages of persecuting and murdering a ton of Christians. And here's what's interesting. I think when we read the Bible, I think that timing is important. I think that different seasons are important. I think sometimes we think that there are just moments that matter, and there are moments that matter. Like when I talk to people and they say, I struggle with smoking, it took me 10 years to stop smoking, I'm like, no, it didn't. It took a moment. You just didn't change for 10 years. And then you had grandkids, and you went, I want to be around. Done. Change. You understand? And so timing is everything, not only when it comes to our world, but also when it comes from a biblical standpoint. Don't you think it's interesting when God decided to knock Paul off his donkey on the way to Damascus? Do you think it would have had the exact same effect if it had happened previously, before he had done so much wrong? Before he had screwed up? You do know that we're people, right? Like, we have emotions, we have guilt, we feel like we need to make things up, we feel like, right? Sometimes, I think last time I was up here, I said sometimes one of the worst places that you can ever be is in that place of perfection, thinking that everything's great. Thinking that, because then, how much do you ultimately need God at that moment, right? And isn't it interesting? Because I really think when you look at the Bible and you look overall, I think it's kind of like an upside-down kingdom. I think that a lot of the things that we think are not the way that God actually thinks. I think that a lot of the way that we make decisions are not the way that God actually makes decisions. I think a lot of the things that many of you in this room think knock you out of contention are actually the exact things that make you worthy of your calling. See, here's an interesting point, guys. The enemy cannot stop God from giving us power. He can't stop him from giving us grace. He can't stop us from giving us favor. He can't stop him from giving us anything. But what can he do? What he can ultimately do is distract you and make you feel like you're not worthy, right? So generally what's going to happen is, because if there's a battle between God and the enemy, who's going to win? It's a fastball, guys. Who's going to win? Right? He's going to win that. You're sitting in church, guys. This is supposed to be like my crowd right now. Like, that's an easy answer right there, okay? If there's a battle between God and who's going to win? Thank you. Wake up, guys, all right? I got limited time here. I got 43 minutes, 18 seconds, okay? So I got limited time right now. I'm a math freak, guys. Just go with it, okay? But what he will do is he won't go right at, he'll go around the side. And he'll start to make you feel not worthy. And he'll say, hey, remember, like he went to Jesus, remember when? Hey, aren't you the one? Hey, this is what happens. Now, we all know this, and yet we fall victim to it time and time and time again. And where we ultimately fall is not to the place where we just go backslidden. We just go into this stalemate mentality, which is almost worse than anything. Because when you're at your lowest, what has to happen before people rise a lot of times? They got to be at their lowest, right? But what happens when they're here? What happens when you're just going through the motions? What happens when you're still showing up to church, right? You're still able to do that. What happens when you're still going to your job, but you should have been fired 7 years ago? Like, I have a thing, guys, I hire a lot of people, right? And I had somebody ask me recently, they said, do you ever feel bad firing someone? And I said, I've never fired someone a day in my life. They fire themselves. I'm just following through with what you told me should happen based on performance. And so the enemy won't come at you and bring you down to the lowest usually. What he does is see if he can just get you in this place right around here, distraction. If he can get you to this place where, look, the power is available to you. The anointing is available. The grace is available, but you're not worthy of that. Well, then he's already won. Going through stuff, experience, is ultimately what God uses us to work with other people. Let me get really real with you guys for a second, okay? Inmates don't listen to people who weren't past inmates. Alcoholics don't listen to people who had never had a drinking problem on the same level that they listen to people, you understand? Business people do not listen to people who have no business teaching them about business. So it's funny, we look at screw-ups as this thing we got to come back from, and I'm saying, what if the kingdom looks at it differently and goes, now I got you where I need you? Because those are the examples I see over and over and over again in the Bible. We talk about timing and how important I think timing is biblically and in real world and whatever. I think sometimes, like I read the Bible and I literally question everything. I think sometimes it drives my wife insane. Because she's like, do you even believe the Bible? Like, you know. And I'm like, no. I need to know what this really means. I can't just know what I've been taught for 70 years, or 36 years in my case, or whatever. I need to know what it really means. Otherwise, I'm going to check the box, and I'm just going to go to church. And I need to know what it really means. What were they actually... Don't you think it's strange that Jesus didn't start his ministry till he was 30 years old? Like, I read that, and I'm like, what the heck were you doing for 29 years? Like, imagine if LeBron James said, I will play basketball when I'm 32, not until I'm 32, because the world is not ready for my talent. We'd be like, come on, like, entertain us. And yet we look at the most powerful man who's ever walked the earth, hear that he started his main profession, his main ministry, when he was 30 years old, and go, okay, just kind of accept it. We hear that a man died, rose again, and go, okay. And I wonder sometimes if we actually believe these things, or if we just are going through what everyone's told us all along. We hear that Jesus was a perfect man. We hear that Jesus was equal parts man, equal parts God. And I have this thing that I start, obviously he was perfect man. I buy into that. That's what makes him Jesus. But sometimes I wonder if being perfect doesn't mean that you never made missteps. I wonder how you learn. I wonder sometimes if being perfect means never making mistakes. Guys, how do you learn if there's only right answers? I'm going to challenge you guys a little bit this morning. How do you learn if there are only right answers? How did you learn when you were coming up? How did you learn in school? Was it because no matter what you said, it was always correct? I think sometimes we need to challenge the very way that we look at things. You see, there's a process that God brings every single one of us through in order to get us to where it is that he wants to use us for. And if we continue to look at everything from our backwards, world-fed mentality, we ultimately never get there. I think sometimes we're blaming the devil for situations that God intended for us, and we are giving God credit for situations that the enemy had intended for us. If it's good, it's God. If it's bad, the enemy. And yet I think in many situations, that place of comfort that many of us find ourselves in is exactly where if I were the enemy, I'd want you. Because you're not motivated at that point. You're not, they say that a mother, if her kid was under a car, could pick up a car. Like could literally, in that moment. Do you think that mother at that time is in a place of comfort? No. And what's happening is that our place of comfort is ultimately becoming our place of conformity. It's what we become used to. And yet our place of discomfort is ultimately where we grow. And that's difficult in a U.S. mentality like we are so fortunate. A lot of you in here, you say, well, I'm uncomfortable on my job. What do you think I say to you? I say, good. You say, well, I have people in my life that make me uncomfortable. What do you think I say to you? I say, good. Guys, you ever wondered why Jesus chose to have Judas in his 12? None of you ever thought about this? Jesus is God, which means he knows all. He knew he was going to get betrayed. And he not only took this man and put him in his 12, he made him head over his finances. You guys have never thought about this? I mean, it's absurd. Would any of you in here do that? Guys, first off, if someone owed me $20 and didn't pay me back, they'd be dead to me, right? Now I'm going to take, not really, guys, not really, just kind of. And now I know ahead of time that this person I'm going to let into my inner circle, I am going to invest time in them, and I'm going to make, and I'm going to make them the head of my finances and put them one of 12 people on planet Earth that walk the earth with me? Is this not making sense to anyone? And so there's one of two ways to look at this guy. You guys don't read the Bible like this? Like, I see you looking at me right now. Like, this is literally the first time you ever thought of that? There's one of two things that's happening right now. Either Jesus isn't as smart as we thought he was, or he doesn't make decisions the way that we make decisions. Have you ever thought that maybe we make decisions out of the prism, out of the litmus test of what we experienced every single day? Have you ever thought that we make decisions maybe not off the same litmus test that God himself would have made decisions? Guys, I wonder sometimes, like, how much of what we think, I wonder sometimes if Jesus came back now, if he would recognize the modern church, or if we'd have to explain it to him. Now, that's not good or bad. I'm just saying it's a different world. Like, he'd be like, what's a video? What is going on right there? Like, what? It'd be a completely, but what I'm saying is rather than taking everything at its face value and going, this is what I've always learned. If this is supposed to be our example, then do we just throw that out and go, no, that doesn't fit so no, we don't have people like that in our core. Because what would you do in that situation? What I'm saying is that the ultimate determiner is not your life experience. It's what God actually did. If I get to the end of my life, and my whole life I thought that I was a white male, and I get there and he goes, hey, you're purple. Guess what I am now? I was just misinformed as to what each thing was. Do you guys get where I'm going with this? What I'm trying to say to you before I move forward here with what I'm going to do is that sometimes we miss out on what God has for us because we're coming from the wrong perspective. And ultimately, we never reach the fullest potential of what God had for our life because we don't honestly think like him. We think like every single person that raised us. You see, we would have looked at that situation, we would have put Judas in our camp, and ultimately, what would we have done? We would have went, hey, hindsight's 20/20. I guess it was a mistake. And yet he knew it ahead of time and still did it. So there's something there. Maybe God knew that in order for us to grow, we needed people who made us uncomfortable. Maybe God understood something that so many of us are avoiding. Maybe some things that we're giving the devil credit for was God's intentions all along, and some of the things that we're giving God credit for were the devil's intentions all along. Guys, I know in my work, so I run a business, I know in my job, if I'm not solving problems, I don't make money. The very thing that we are water as people. We are path of least resistance. That's what we go for. You drop water down anything, it's going to go the path of least resistance. And I know in my world, if I'm not solving problems, I'm not making money. And many people in this room are trying to figure out all these different ways to eliminate issues in your life, and I have some great uplifting news for you. It's never going to end. And if you are still solving the same problems 5 years from now that you are now, you have lost. Life is not about eliminating the issues in your life. It's about creating bigger and better issues. That's how you know that you're moving forward. I tell business people, I'm like, look, when you start out, you're trying to figure out how to make a sale happen. Good for you. But if that's your issue 4 years from now, you've lost. 4 years from now, you should be having issues with your schedule. You should be having hiring issues. You should be having, what are my payroll issues? You should be having, people are writing mean blogs about me. You should have, the point is not to eliminate issues. The point is ultimately to put ourselves in situations where we are uncomfortable because I need conflict to exercise my gifts. You understand? We had so we all have different gifts. We all have different talents. They're all different. They're all different levels of potential and different, whatever. And it was funny because I was talking to my wife last week, and I was saying to her, I was in, I don't remember where I was. I was somewhere across the country, and I was getting ready to go on somewhere. And I'm in the middle of a season right now where I'm talking all over North America, different, it's probably driving them insane. Red Eyes home, go to soccer, go, just whatever. And it can get very Mundane. Tiring, yes, but mundane. Like, here we go again. Flip the switch, here we go. Flip the switch, here we go. Like, I know my message. I know what to say. It's not like doing this, where you have to come up with news. Like, I know I've got 50 hours of content. Let's just make this go for 45 minutes, right? And so I was doing this, and I was getting ready to go on the next place, and God convicted me. And he basically let me know that I gave you talents, I gave you gifts, and you're winging it right now. Like, you're going out there. So I have a gift in that world to create intellectual capital and to communicate that and to ultimately, right? And so I was giving these messages over and over, and it just became like a thing that I can do. And he convicted me and said, your gift is never going to grow if it doesn't have conflict, if you don't make it uncomfortable. And so I said to my wife before I got up on this, I was getting ready to go out, and I was in my room, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to head over there, whatever. And I said, you know what? I'm not bringing anything. I'm not going to bring any notes. I'm not going to bring anything. I'm just going to go up there. I'm going to look at the crowd. I'm going to talk to them for a couple minutes, and then here we go for 60 to 90 minutes. I'm just going to go, right? I am going to make myself uncomfortable, and I'm going to test myself, right? Now, guys, I bombed horribly. No, I didn't. I'm just kidding, guys. I know you're wondering where that was going. But the point was that in order for me to ultimately work the gift that God had given me, I had to put myself in uncomfortable situations, which made me uncomfortable, because I could have followed notes and done whatever. It's no different than you have a natural body set, whatever, but in order for anything to grow, what do you have to do? You got to work it. You got to make it soar. You've got to ultimately, your gifts are no different. Some of you are stale because you're still doing the same thing, and everybody's looking at you going, oh, look how awesome you are, and the truth is you can't fool God. You know you're winging it. There is a different level for your gifts. And just because you saw a certain level and now you've reached that level does not mean that was the level. God sees things from a completely different perspective. So I want to talk about today a little bit talents and gifts. I want to talk about, if you guys could turn to Matthew 25, verse 14. I'm going to go over a very familiar scripture on the parable of the talents. And I'm going to talk about three things that this teaches us. Matthew 25, 14. We'll start there. You guys there? Matthew 25, 14. I'm going to start. You guys can meet me over there. Parable of the talents. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, to another 1 bag, each according to his ability, different levels of ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. What we see in the next few verses is that when the master returns, the one who had 5 created 5 more, the one who had 2 created 2 more, and he says to both of them equally, come share in your master's happiness. Jumping forward to verse 24. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you had not sown and gathering where you had not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Verse 26, his master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. How many of you know when you're in fear, you make bad decisions? How many of you know when you're in fear, you make bad decisions? How many of you know when you are not coming from a position of strength, what ultimately happens is that you make decisions based on what you have to do instead of what you should do? I'm going to say that again. How many of you have ever had to make decisions based on what you have to do instead of what you should do? You know, a story I don't often share with people is when I had switched over, I was running a top real estate team, one of the top in the country, and I was making great money, and everything was fantastic, and I ultimately felt that I was being called to a different place, and I made a huge decision to switch off of that and go into the companies that I now run, okay? And a lot of people can look at that now and go, oh, what a great decision. What a lot of people don't know is for the first 2 years that I made that transition, it was one of the most difficult parts of our life. It was financially difficult. It was emotionally difficult. I went from making a ton of money to now trying to make a name for myself in a world that I didn't have a name there. And it was difficult. And one of the things that I am most proud of is during that time, when we were literally having to take money out of our kids' bank or out of their piggy banks to pay for pizza at their birthday parties, we were still tithing. We were still living a giving lifestyle. And the reason why is because I understood what I'm trying to tell you today, which is that although there are moments when you want to make decisions based on what you have to do instead of what you should do, doing what you should do is still always the right decision. Because what I did, understanding the timing of God, was that I sometimes think that God views our lives a lot like a video editor. This will make sense to 7 of you, but for those ones, this will be a great example. But when you have a video editor spread out on a computer, you've got a little line of like strip of video, and then there's a little button over here where you can zoom in, zoom out, and it can get really big or it can get really small, right? And I think sometimes that we look at it as really small, and everything we do right now matters so much. And everything is like, oh my God, I need to do this, or this isn't gonna happen, or this isn't gonna work, or this isn't, and we look right now, and sometimes I think God is that master video editor who sees the whole picture and goes, no, 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 no. It's not about doing what you have to do, it's about doing what you should do. It's always the right decision. And I was able at that moment to take a deeper look back and say, you know what? I know where we're going. I know that God's hand is on me. And this isn't comfortable right now, but I'm gonna make a decision based on what I should do, not what I have to do at this moment. Now that's easy to say if I'm standing up here and never had to go through that. That was super difficult. Anybody agree with that? That was super difficult. Now, this goes on. In verse 28, it says, so take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more. Well, this doesn't sound like modern, how we would think at all. And they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Guys, I still don't know what this weeping and gnashing of teeth is in the Bible, but I know every time they say it, it's like the ultimate drop down, like it's bad, right? It's like lay the hammer down, gnashing of teeth, right? I don't know what it is, but it's bad. But here's what I also know when I'm hearing this story right now. I did a little research and I found that a talent in today's world would be worth just about $1 million. And so just when we start feeling bad for the person with one, because that's what we do, we're like, well, how come they only got one? Guys, you can feel bad for me every day of the week if someone wants to give me $1 million. Anybody else with me on that right there? Okay? That also means that God doesn't think small. We have these mentalities, which I'll touch on in a little bit, especially when it comes to finances, especially in the church, that I just don't know that God agrees with. We'll touch on that in a minute. So what are the 3 things? You guys taking notes? You guys taking notes? 3 things that we learn from the story, the parable of the talents. You ready? Number 1? Number 1 thing we learn, we have to work and use our imagination. Number 1 is we have to work and use our imagination. In Genesis, they were put there to work. In this story, we see that they were put there, they were given a certain number of talents, and then what? It was ultimately up to who? Last time I was up here, I said that Jesus didn't just die on the cross so that we could get out. I said he died on the cross so that he could get in, right? And I ultimately said that the way that you view that transaction ultimately determines how you view this world. Because if you view salvation as a ticket out, well, then you think that you don't need to do anything on this earth at all. Why? Because it just doesn't matter. A lot of you, I've grown up my whole life hearing from people that you don't need to create any kind of material success on this planet. Because why? You can't take it with you. You guys heard that one? Hey guys, you can't take your body with you either. Did you brush your teeth this morning? It's not a smart argument. Can't take your body, and yet most of you, I'll go 98%, shower on a regular basis, clean your teeth, you try to eat well, your body's no good after this. Why are you taking care of that? Look, guys, when you're able to create financially, when you learn how to work and you learn how to use your imagination, so much more comes from that. I think I've told you I've been broke and not broke. One's easier than the other. Can we just agree on that? Like, when you create on this earth, not only are you able to give a better lifestyle to yourself and to the people around you and eliminate stress, which causes disease, but you're also able to help bless other people. I picture God as like this God that's like hovering over the earth, and he's looking for people to fulfill the needs of the prayers that have been prayed for years and years, and he keeps going along the Christian church going, no, they believe everybody's supposed to be broke. And he's going around from one person to the next going, hey, I need $200. They're like, I don't have $200, but I'll pray for you. Great, I need $200. This guy needs a suit over here. And then he goes to the next place, and he's like, hey, I need someone to help that mom out get her groceries. And you're going, no, I don't believe in creating any kind of financial overflow. So you know what? I'm just going to pray for that person. And at some point, you ultimately have to become the answer to the prayer, not just the one who's creating the prayer. And that will never happen as long as you hold on to these limiting beliefs that we don't need to create anything on this earth. I discussed this recently, and I had a lady come up to me afterwards, and she goes, you know, I heard you talking about money. Money won't make you happy. And I said, ma'am, neither will poverty. Can we move on now? Like, money won't make you happy. Neither is being broke, because I'm talking to you, and you don't seem happy. And I'm assuming which side you're falling on. Money won't make you happy is 100% true, but neither will being broke. And holding on to that inner narrative that you were not supposed to have overflow, that you were not supposed to create, that you were not supposed to be a blessing to others is absolutely an offense to God. Because he searches around this world and says, who can I use to answer the prayers that have been prayed for years? You know what? Can I just get really real for a second now? Is that all right? My wife's like, don't do it. Please don't do it. I feel it. You know what the truth of the matter is? Most of the people in this room do not have control over your income. Most of the people in this room listening to me right now, you like what I'm saying, but you do not have direct control over your income, meaning that your level of work is not proportionate to the level of income that you make. Is that true or not true? And so you listen to what I say and you go, that sounds fantastic, whatever, but I don't have control over that. And you know what you have control over? You have control over what you spend. Some of you don't have overflow, not because you don't make enough money, but because you spend too much money. Is that too soon? Look, I get it, guys. We live in America. Okay, can I break something down for you right now? If you're in this room and you're the poorest person in this room, you're in the 1% in the world. Okay? Get upset about it, go do whatever, but in the meantime, drive home in your car, talk on your cell phone, and go watch your big screen TV. Most of us in this room are having financial issues and are not able to ultimately do what it is God wants us to do, not because of our level of income, but because of our level of expenses. I'm going to tell you, I would rather eat ramen noodles and be able to be a blessing to God. We got to send our kids to this. We got to eat out twice a week. We can't make coffee. It's America, so we got to go buy coffee. We got to have cable, got to have... Okay, I'm just, like, if you can call me on a cell phone, don't complain about not making enough money. Like, sorry. And yet most of us go, if I just made a little bit more money, how many of you felt, if I just made a little bit, don't raise your hands, but if I just made a little bit more money, we've all felt like that. Guys, those people are broke at 30,000, they're broke at 50,000, they're broke at 100,000, they're broke at 500,000, they're broke at 1 million, and they're broke at 1 billion. Because having overflow has nothing to do with what you make. It has to do with what you spend. Everybody get that? All right. But you gotta work And you got to use your imagination. Do you think it was an accident that our example, Jesus, was a carpenter who literally took talent and resources and made things out of imagination? Literally, very little of what we enjoy today was created as that thing. Like, this didn't come out as a speaker. Chairs did. A tree was formed. Someone took a tool and imagination and made a chair. You understand? Everything we do doesn't come from it already being. It comes from the talent God gives us, mixed with the resources that he put on this earth, and ultimately putting those two together, imagination. And you create ultimately almost every single thing on this planet that you enjoy. Was not created as that thing. Like, that's a breakthrough for some of you. But as long as you buy into this handout, get fed, subservient theology that God is just, I follow a God who stands back and says, Adam, name the animals. I follow a God who stands back and says, Noah, build the ark. He didn't say, go check out the ark I just made. He said, build the ark. I follow a God who says, Paul, start my church. And we think that all of a sudden in a 2018 world that he stopped asking us to build and create because we have so much. He wants us to multiply. He gives us a talent. We would get $1 million and go, I'm good. And yet in that story, the guy who got given $1 million is the one who lost. So we sit in America and we go, I'm good. And I'm telling you, a lot of us are going to get to the end and he's going to go, you're not good. Because that was supposed to multiply. Not according to what I gave anyone else, not according to what someone had near you, but it was supposed to multiply based on what I gave you. Period. Bishop T.D. Jakes has an amazing quote where he says, God never once made a company, never once made a business, never once made a car or anything. He put us here and he said, imagine what could be. Created living beings, he gave them talent, he gave them resources, and he said, work and imagine. When was the last time you worked and imagined? Because when you're not, your potential is never fully, you may be comfortable. Sometimes the stuff we're giving God credit for is where the enemy wanted us all along, and sometimes the things we're giving the enemy credit for is where God, you understand? I'm trying to change your mentality a little bit right now, guys. I said last time I was up here, I said we greatly overestimate what we can do with somebody else's talents, and we underestimate what we can do with our own. You guys remember that? We overestimate what we can do with someone else's talents, and we underestimate what we can do with our own. What does that mean? We love to look at other people and say what we would do if we were them. We love to look at other companies and say, if I were them, well, you're not, Bob. We have what we were given. And every moment we spend looking at someone else's gifts, is every moment that we're not doing what? Which is a complete waste of the time God gave us on this planet. Guys, you realize, this is how real it is to me. You guys want a little insight on how I think? There is someone right now sitting on their deathbed praying for another 90 seconds so they can say goodbye to their family, and we sit here and waste time. You want perspective? Do you need that kind of contrast? There are people who would literally die for the amount of time you have to sit here and listen to me right now, and we waste time looking at other people's talents and gifts and say what we would do if we had those. Some of you are sitting in this room and you're going, I wonder if I'm next. And you're missing the point. If you're in this room, you're now. You're now. If you're young and you're in this room, you're now. If you're middle-aged and you're in this room, you're now. If you're old and you're in this room, I'll say it a little louder, but you're now. You've been here for a while, you're now. You're new here, you're now. You're new to the faith, you're now. There is no someday with God. Like, we play different roles, our roles shift, there are different seasons, but there is not a bench in God's kingdom. It's not a, if Jared gets hurt, Marco, come tag team me. You're now. What are you doing right now to perfect those gifts? What are you doing right now with the time God has given you? What imagination are you using right now? Because there are a lot of people that would take that time from you in a second. And that's not okay. The second thing we learn, we are not all created with equal talent and potential. Don't worry, guys, I knew that wouldn't go over well. I wasn't looking for a amen on that one, because then I know you're not listening. We're not all created with equal talent and potential. It says that the talents were given out according to their ability. Now, we may not think that that's fair, but is that not how life is? Guys, is everyone here have the same potential? God, no. Have you guys talked to each other? No. God, no. Like, you don't believe that? Remember those when you're a kid? You can be anything you want to be. Like, you can, think big and then think bigger. Like, great, I want to be a center in the NBA. You need a moment to think about that? Like, it's not going to happen, right? We all are given, now, we all have equal amounts of opportunity. We are all equally loved by God. But we do not have the same level of talents and potential. And you know what the amazing thing is? You know what the great thing is? Is that because we do not have the same level of talents and potential, we are not judged the same either. We are judged according to what we were given, and that's it. Look, the one with 2 wasn't expected to create 5. The one with 5 was not expected to create 8. They were expected 2 to create 2, 5 to create 5, and in the end, what did it say to both of them when they returned to the master? The exact same thing. Come share in your master's happiness. Same response. Because the 2 wasn't accountable on the same level as the 5, because the 2 could never do the 5, because they weren't given the same level of talent. For some of you who get depressed that you don't have the same number as someone else, you should equally feel great about the idea that you're only judged according to what you were given, and you were given a role on this planet, and all that matters is what that role is. That's it. We all have different stuff. And what is the third thing we learn? The third thing we learn is that checking the box doesn't count with God. I'm going to act like I see hands writing right now. The third point. Checking the box doesn't count with God. Going through the motions doesn't get you anything with God. Guys, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. We always get down on the one who was given the one talent, and we say, what a wasteful jerk that should experience gnashing of teeth. What did the one with one talent do? Guys, look at the Bible like I look at the Bible. Like, just think for a second, okay? What did the one with the one talent do? Buried it. What's another word for bury? I go plant. I was looking at this, and God showed me something that I've never seen before when I looked at it. We get down on the one with one talent because they buried it in the soil. They buried it in the dirt. That one did the exact same thing a farmer would do when they expected a harvest. They planted it in the soil. The only difference was it wasn't the right resource. It wasn't the right time. It wasn't any of those things. And now, that one with the one talent is able to blame God and go, I planted it, just like Farmer Joe down there, only Farmer Joe got a harvest. Why didn't you water it? I did what I was supposed to do. I'm just following your rules. And yet, They're the example of the one because going through the motions doesn't count with God. I wonder sometimes how many of us get upset with God and say, I'm at church every week. God, I'm serving. God, I even give sometimes. I wonder how many of us, just when we want to put down the one with the one talent, can relate to the one on one talent with one talent so greatly. And realize that there are things that we want. We want promotions. We want happiness. We want a lot of these different things. And yet if the Bible were written about us today, I wonder which one of us, which role we would play. You see what I'm saying? That's what's called empathy, guys. You know the beautiful thing about today's world? We have churches and stages and mics and guys with no filter who'll get up and say, wake up. Wake up. Because it looks like you're planting seed, but you're burying talents. It looks like you're planting seed. It looks like you can check that box. It looks like it. But you can't fool God. Here's the amazing thing, too. I said timing is so important, right? Sometimes we are doing things that we were actually called to do. Sometimes we are doing things that God actually told us to do. The only problem is he told us to do it 5 years ago. And what happens is that that thing ultimately becomes the enabler that allows us to ultimately get comfortable. And if you're not careful, that place of comfort will very easily become your place of capture because you'll start to believe the half-truth that God said. And God did say, but he stopped saying it. Strike the rock. Just because you say to do something doesn't mean you keep doing it. If my wife and I are going away for a night and I say, kids, go stay over so-and-so's house, I didn't send them there for adoption. It was for a night. Like if I say, hey guys, can my kids stay over tonight? And they say yes, and I still haven't picked them up in 4 years. You said they could stay over. Well, God, you said to do this. God, you said to do this. And he's going, I didn't send you there for adoption. I said to do it on Wednesday in 1987. It is now Sunday in 2018. Where does the time go? God. I think that most people in this room right now would agree that you, as I said in the beginning, you have talents, you have potentials, and I think we question when the time is. I think we question whether we are qualified. I think we question a lot of those things because the greatest human addiction on planet Earth is not drugs or alcohol, it's addiction to our own problems. It's what we think about more than anything. Second greatest addiction is addiction to other people's approval, by the way. The more you say, I don't care about what anybody thinks, I know the more you care about what everybody thinks, okay? So the greatest human addiction is the addiction to our own problems. And so when we say, are we worthy, are we not worthy, are we qualified, are we not qualified, the nice thing is you don't get to make that call, right? So here's the interesting thing here, guys. What I'm hoping you get out of today is I'm hoping that you start to understand that if you're in this room, you're qualified. I want you to understand if you're watching online, you can see this, you're qualified, and it's your time. I want you to know that if you can breathe right now, you're qualified. I want you to know that if you've struggled, you're qualified. I want you to know if you've screwed up, you're qualified. I want you to know if you can see me right now, you're qualified. But you have to put in the work. You got to use your imagination. You understand? You got to use your imagination. You got to put in the work. You got to use your imagination and ultimately go after that. Like, you can't check boxes. Where's your heart? You could fool me. You could fool the pastors in this house. You're not fooling the one who created those people. You understand? You got a certain amount of time on this planet. It's your time. Thank you, guys.
They moved my mic. If you're like me, I hope you took lots of notes because there's a lot to go back and meditate and think about. I love the idea that we are not disqualified by what we've done wrong, but often we become more qualified by those very things. And we got to get over ourselves and get back into God. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your promises to us. God, we thank you that you said your grace is sufficient for us. And that, Lord, as we lean on you, God, you begin to open the floodgates of heaven. You don't just pour out money, but you pour out wisdom. You pour out blessing. Father, you pour out your love to us. Father, for those who have sat today, and Father, who feel ashamed for maybe areas they've not excelled like they would have liked to, God, I ask you to open their eyes to see that it's in those places that they get to lean on you more. And Lord, in that moment, experience your strength and learn your lessons. God, I pray right now for those who are encouraged and who are excited, that you would give them the wisdom, give us wisdom and creativity, Lord, not just to accomplish for ourselves, as Jared said, but Lord, to have your heart, to be your answer to prayer to those around us. Lord, even as we have set the mission that the gospel of the kingdom is the solution to the problems of the kingdom of this world, God, may we be those kingdom citizens operating with wealth and creativity and love in overflowing measure, that the world would see you in us and through us. Lord, I thank you for this. We pray your blessing over your people as we go from here today. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. If you need prayer, we'll have folks up here. But go and spread the good news of Jesus.